Go ahead. This is certainly one of the highlights we look forward to at every conference. It is our keynote session. So we are lucky to welcome André Mendes, the Chief Information and Artificial Intelligence Officer for Tarrant County, Texas. As a global C-suite executive, André leads rapid and profound organizational transformation in the most challenging of environments. He's recognized as an expert and thought leader on the highest level global stages. He's worked with heads of state, the White House, the EU, Congress. He's globally recognized for forward-thinking visions, focused leadership and strategic decision-making, resolving critical issues, restoring operational excellence and profitability while reinventing industries. He's an active top secret, top secret SCI clearance, in-depth CXO experience in operations technology, media, financial, healthcare, travel, government, and scientific arenas. André, what don't you do? So we are so thankful that you have taken time out of your incredibly busy week, month, year. Not trying to sing the Friends theme song, but thank you for being here. I'm going to hand it over to you for this hour as you take us through super and quantum and cyber and AI. Oh my. Please give a round of welcome for André.
Hey guys, we appreciate it. All right. Well, good afternoon. I wanted to make a personal comment real quickly. So I came to this country in 1980, 79 actually. And my dream as a kid growing up in Portugal was to play basketball in the United States. It had never been done by a Portuguese citizen. And so in 1981, I made the team at a small college in the university in Maryland. And it was amazing. And it just so happens recently I ran into a teammate of mine from 45 years ago. Gil, can you stand up? Yeah. So we went for 40 years without seeing each other, and here we are. All right. Thank you for allowing me that personal moment. So in this conference, and I've heard some of the presentations already, you have heard and are going to hear from exceptional individuals in the cybersecurity arena. Individuals that know far more about cybersecurity than I do, and my guess would be that 90% of you in the room know more about cybersecurity than I do. But what I wanted to bring to you with this presentation is a little different view about computing and cybersecurity as it relates to humankind, okay? Halfway through my presentation, you'll be wondering, where's this guy going? What does this have to do with what we do on a daily basis? But hopefully, I'll be able to bring it back so that you see my viewpoint in terms of the influence in society and humankind that all of this technology tsunami is both taking and is going to continue to take. Okay, so a few disclaimers to start with. The presentation and the thoughts are mine and mine alone, so don't impute any fault to Tarrant County for anything I say. No mention of a company, organization, or product constitutes an endorsement. So if you decide that you're going to buy stock in somebody because you heard me say something, that's your problem. For those of you who are old enough, I bought UUNet stock. Yeah, I can see, you know. All right, that's how smart I was investing, right? Here's something that I believe has been with me throughout my career, and I've been in IT for 45 years now. You either shape the future or you suffer it. I prefer to shape it. But in order to do that, you got to know where you're going. It is time to think big. Technology has always been in an exponential growth pattern. With all of the technology that is at the table today and will come to the table over the next 3 to 5 years, that exponential becomes asymptotic, literally just transforming at a speed that we've never seen before. The expectation is that the entire realm of knowledge will change more in this decade than in all previous human history. Okay? And so if you think that things have moved very fast over the last 10 years, and then you think that over the next 10 years will be the same thing, you're sorely mistaken. Over the next 10 years, it will be absolutely exponential, 200-fold what we've experienced in the previous 10 years. So that tells you where we need to be from a technology standpoint. All right, so here we go. An accelerating evolutionary road. So prokaryotes, the original single-cell organisms, to sentiency, who we are, 3.5 to 4 billion years. From sentiency, the first, primates, right, to Homo sapiens sapiens, we at the Hackney of the scale, 7 million years. From Homo sapiens sapiens to ENIAC, the first commercially available computer, 300,000 years. From ENIAC to El Capitan, and I'll tell you about El Capitan later on, but it performs at 1.81 exaflops, a mere 77 years. So then the question is, what's next? Well, from El Capitan to engineered sentiency, 2 to 3 years are the best guesses from some of the futurists out there. Far shorter timelines, far faster progress, right? And this is not about to slow down. Asymptotic acceleration. So, interestingly enough, at the same time, but on a slower scale, we also see a rise in human longevity. Homo habilis, right, one of the first primordial human beings, so to speak. Life expectancy was 20 to 30 years. Brutish life, infant mortality, the elements, it was a rough life. In the Middle Ages, it didn't get much better. It was 30 to 40 years. Why? Well, there was some agriculture, some medical knowledge that started percolating, some trade, and even an early stage OBGYN, okay, where actually there was a specialization for delivering children, right? In 1900 London, which was the most advanced city in the world at that time, life expectancy was a mere 45 to 50 years. Not a big significant rise. But then all of a sudden, things change. Nutrition, hygiene, developing medical know-how, we started coming to the table. In 1950 US, it jumped to 70. And you know what the biggest change from London to the US in 1970 was, and 70 years old was? The introduction of sewer systems. Because people stopped dying from diarrhea and dysentery and all of that, right? Urban sewer systems, water that is properly filtrated, antibiotics, vaccines, pasteurization, neonatality care, all of these things contributed to increasing life expectancy, right? 2019 in the US, 78.9. Modern medicine, monoclonal antibodies, I'll talk a little more about that later. Radiology, nutrition, safety, genomics, weather-related deaths down 90%. So we saw a substantial amount of increase. 2050 in the US, 120 and 85. Why the split? The split will be absolutely driven by by wealth levels. Okay, that already exists today, but the split today is like this. In another few years, the split will be like this. This will continue to rise, but this will rise at an incredible speed. So, at the same time, from a scientific standpoint, we have an inward migration. What do I mean by that? Initially, we started taking care of things from an environmental standpoint, things like shelter and fire, external medical advances, amputations, right? You got a leg amputated, you didn't die of a blood infection. That was medicine. Excisions, tooth extractions. If you had a bad tooth infection that didn't get treated, you would die in very short order. So even removing a tooth was effectively a medical intervention of substantial impact, right? Sewer and clean water like we talked about. And then we started moving internally, right? Antibiotics, with their introduction in the World War II arena, an enormous amount of life saved, right? Chemotherapy, statins, right? I would ask how many of you are on statins, but my guess would be that in a crowd like this, you're probably looking at 30 to 40%, right? Vitamins, even vitamin supplements, right? But now all of a sudden we get into a new realm, intracell therapies with techniques like endocytosis, and don't worry if you do not know what some of these things mean. It doesn't matter. But it's moving inside the cell and taking care of things at the cellular level. Peptides, viral vectors, nanoparticles, right? And I'll give you some examples later on. And then an introduction of a technology a few years back called CRISPR. It stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats. But what does it really mean? Well, it's Word for your genetic code, so you can edit it, right? And now, DNA and RNA altering techniques, gene replacement, editing, and silencing of gene expressions, right? So that you can control diseases that are regulated by gene expressions, by interfering with those mechanisms. By the way, the mRNA vaccine for COVID was an introduction of a nanoparticle-derived vector with some DNA inclusions in there. And I'm not trying to be controversial, but it was a very interesting development. So, how is this all being driven? Now we come back to technology a little bit. Infinite power, absolutely infinite power. 2001, the top 500 supercomputer leader was a machine called IBM ASCII White. How many of you are familiar with top500.org? There you go, at least one or two. Okay, so it's an organization that tests twice a year all the supercomputers in the world and then ranks them. Okay? So in 2001, ASCII White performed at 7,226 gigaflops. So what's a gigaflop? It's 1 billion floating point operations per second. Now try to understand in your mind what 7,226 billion operations per second mean. And all of us, we can't even figure out what that is. But that's child's play. That's absolutely child's play, right? 2024, top 500 supercomputer leader, El Capitan, I told you I was going to come back to it, performs at 1.81 exaflops. All right, so that's 1.81 billion gigaflops. An exaflop is a quintillion floating point operations per second. If you didn't think you could understand the gigaflop, we have no idea what a quintillion is and what an exaflop is. Meanwhile, the barriers to entry drop dramatically. And by the way, like I told you before, do you think that this is going to stop now? And next year will be the same thing? No, it's not. It's going to continue to accelerate, right? Meanwhile, the barriers to entry drop dramatically because what happens when this thing here can perform 1.81 exaflops? Well, it will cost $600 million. But now you can buy something for $1 million that can perform at a level that is unthinkable 5 years ago, right? And so the barriers to entry for research are dropped dramatically, expanding dramatically the ability of people to perform the type of scientific research that otherwise would be impossible. A boon for open source efforts. About 2.5 years ago, the Google CEO said that open source efforts are progressing faster in AI than Google can, and that they have to be aware of that because otherwise they'll be surpassed. Rapid AI acceleration. How many of you had in your strategic plan in 2022 generative AI? One of you did? Rock and roll, sir. All right, because I was at the Department of Commerce at the time, and I can guarantee you there was not a single U.S. department that had generative AI in their realm. I had AI in there because I was in charge of NOAA, and we've been doing AI since '85, but nobody else was doing it. How many companies do not have AI in their strategic plan today? 0, unless you're a mom and pop shop, and even then, you better embrace it, right? An equal boon for rogue operators. Nowadays, AI, deep fakes, AI engineered email phishing and everything else is just exploding, right? One of the reasons why you're in this conference, so you can find out from a cybersecurity standpoint how to stop those bastards, right? But everybody has access to it. And this is all before quantum fully matures, right? And the gentleman, not the last one, but the gentleman before that was talking about that and what a challenge that would be from a cybersecurity standpoint, and cryptography and everything else. The challenge is absolutely real because the maturation of quantum computing is again going to change the entire paradigm of technology and, in my view, of humankind. Quantum in 3 sentences. In 2019, Google's 53-qubit Sycamore processor completed a random circuit sampling task in 200 seconds, a feat estimated to take 10,000 years on the world's fastest supercomputer of the time. Now, we just talked about supercomputers that are running at quintillion operations per second. And this changed a 10,000 a year time frame to 200 seconds. And by the way, this was 2019, which is quantum computing, is eons ago, right? So now, in 2023, the team's development of the 255-photon Juzang 3 demonstrated quantum supremacy that surpassed classical supercomputers by 10 to the 16th orders of magnitude. That is, you can read the number yourself. Okay? That's 4 years, right? So does it stop there? IBM is building a large-scale quantum computer, 20,000 times more powerful than today's leading quantum computers, that would require a memory of more than a quindecillion of the world's most powerful supercomputers to simulate. Expected to be commercially available in 2029. Now, how many of you know what a quindecillion is? Man, we got some smart people in this room. I love it. What on earth is a quindecillion? That's a quindecillion. Okay? That's a quindecillion. So where does it stop? And the answer is it doesn't stop. And it changes everything, right? So, evolution, part 2. If you remember the movie, anybody? No? Okay, all right. So that was a funny thing, not scientific thing, nobody knows it. All right. Okay. Evolution is, and has always been, ruthless. Ruthless, okay? From best to show to long forgotten is but a nanosecond. Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, the famous Neanderthals. They were once the top of the charts, and then they became the bottom, and then they became extinct, right? Current acme, we, Homo sapiens sapiens. Next acme, machina, sapiens sapiens. And by the way, that term is trademarked. So don't go trying to figure out how to use it. All right? Look for pivotal signs that will change everything. Compositional thinking, meta-learning for compositionality, the ability to derive things from data that might appear totally unrelated, but with our capability as human beings, we make the connection. For example, Sir Isaac Newton, hit by an apple, gravity, right? Those type of things, those type of leaps by mankind that are brought to us by metacompositionality. Self-awareness, complex emotion, and thought abstraction. What separates us from just a raw speed of machines. Philosophically speaking, now this is an interesting concept, I think. I think it's interesting, you might not think so. But are we primordial, yet incredibly efficient artificial intelligence and LLMs? Okay, think about it. You're born, you have a genetic makeup. From that point forward, every single experience that you have in your environment or the outside world that you perceive is called epigenetics. And it starts building a body of knowledge. And over time, you learn a language, you learn how to communicate, you learn facts, you learn science, you learn technology, and then you can expertly talk about it and relate it. If you think about it, that really is like an AI LLM that has generative AI at the interface level so that I can talk and you can understand, right? And we'll come back to that later. So, evolution part 3. the AI edition. The current LLM paradigm is unsustainable. Unsustainable, okay? Enormous training and running resources requirements, right? You look at all of these data centers and everything else, right? It is unbelievable the amount of energy and computing resources that are being used so that we can go on our little interface and say, hey, Grok, when was the last time somebody from Portugal won a medal in the Olympics? And it comes back with an answer, right? But that is generating a massive amount of resource usage, right? Because people not always ask complex questions, and they're using LLMs now as Google, right? As a search engine, right? Hallucinations, we've all heard about that. Limited reasoning, and also data inbreeding, because often the algorithms are being trained on data, sometimes data generated itself. No bueno. No bueno. Okay? You're going to see a shift to smaller and more efficient SLMs, right? Area specific, task specific, much lower resource consumption. It might even be able to run on edge devices like phones and laptops rather than these massive data centers. And then will give rise to hybrid and multimodal systems for utilization. Sort of using like spiking or liquid neural networks and active inference engines on the edge, and then going back to an LLM when there's need for further data diving, right? From a passive prediction to dynamic, goal-oriented reasoning with live data. And if that's starting to sound familiar, it should. Drawing from neuroscience and utilizing neuromorphic chips. So we go away from the typical von Neumann computer predicate of a CPU and memory and storage and circuits for interfaces coming in and going out to an environment that looks a lot more like the human brain, with millions of small processors connected by billions of synapses. Decentralized and relational AI, okay? By utilizing some of the very principles that are at the core of our functioning as Homo sapiens sapiens. AI as a co-creator in uncertain environments so that it's not a prisoner of the LLM and previous known knowledge. Ethical, empathetic, attuned systems over sheer optimization. Very important. Very important, especially as it relates to the ruthlessness of evolution. The introduction of empathy and ethics into artificial intelligence models is about as important as anything that we will undertake as human beings. Because in the absence of it, we are Neanderthals. A brokered general artificial intelligence environment fronted by a triage engine. What do I mean by that? There's going to be an environment up front that will take your queries, whether they're simple or very complex, and then decide how to use resources that are published with published competencies throughout the internet, where you'll have literally the certification of certain engines as being reliable in this area versus others that are not. Sort of the white actors, right? In terms of ethics and everything else, is fronted by a front engine and then decides where to go for additional information. Accessing dedicated subject matter expert SLMs on demand. But how do you pay for that? Paid by the drink with micropayments over blockchain auditable accounts. So that when you're interfacing with an LLM, so to speak, or your human interface for that, what you're looking at is a brokered network of all kinds of engines that have different knowledge bases that are very, very good at their specific tasks and therefore can provide good information by going through that abstraction layer back to your response. Now, in other words, like humankind, you go to your family physician, he diagnoses you with a problem, let's say a neoplasm, cancer, and sends you to an oncologist. The oncologist does its analysis and sends you to a specialist let's say, for example, in breast cancer, in somebody that is very, very familiar and is an expert in the BRCA1, BRCA2 genetic markups, and all the things that needed to be done in order to address that, right? So you have that specialization, but now from an AI standpoint, and by leveraging SLMs, in other words, specialization, okay? So we keep coming back, the neuromorphic chips to the way the brain is done and it works, and now the AI at this level coming back to levels of expertise that are distributed throughout the environment, right? All of this is going to drive sort of an AI-driven medical nirvana. Okay? Let me explain. When you're born, you have your genetics. Actually, when you're conceived, you have your genetics. That is your genetic base. From that microsecond on, everything in your environment is going to change those genetics. Those are called epigenetics, and it will continue until the day you die. Right? If you die. I'll explain later. Right? And so we are moving from understanding the genome to now moving into epigenetics and everything else after that. The genome was decoded in 2001. By the way, on HP computers that today couldn't run as fast as your laptop. I was working in collaboration with Celera Genomics. At the time, and what they were doing was fantastic, but the power of those computers was absolutely ridiculous by today's standards, right? We moved to the proteome, right? The way the proteins are expressed by the genes, to a process called glycolization, which is how proteins interface with their environment and get appended with sugar molecules and this type of molecules, and to protein folding. The moment you understand protein folding, you start to have a keen insight into disease etiology, the way that disease appears and progresses, right? So that you can then possibly reverse it. Optimized therapy progression, right? So what do I mean by that? Historically, medications were compounds. Organizations, pharmaceuticals, will go out into nature, collect thousands of compounds, and then test them against all kinds of diseases. And if they found one that acted against a certain disease, they developed that. They started studying it. That process took normally about 18 years and $800 million to get to the market, right? Now, that was unsustainable, absolutely unsustainable. And a lot of them had side effects, that because there were no alternatives, you could say, okay, well, I'll live with the side effects, right? From that, we moved to what today is the coin of the realm. Biologicals or monoclonal antibodies. Every single commercial that you see on TV for the new medications, for example, for psoriasis, right? You will notice that the generic name ends in MABE for monoclonal antibody, right? Now, these are derived from substances in your own body. That's why they're called biologicals. And as a result, have much faster development and much faster approval, and become very, very enticing because they also have lower side effects. From that, we move into group pharmacogenomics. What do I mean by that? Let's say that you have a specific category of disease that is related to your genetic makeup. There are medications like Herceptin that target that particular set of people that have that genetic makeup and resolve that problem. But that's just the beginning, because the next thing is individual pharmacogenomics, so that every medication is predicated on your exact genetic and epigenetic profile, and therefore can treat your disease much better than something that is for the general public and with much lower side effects, right? So individualized medicine. DNA optimization. So let's assume that you have a desirable trait. Eidetic memory. You know what eidetic memory is? Somebody that can remember everything that has ever happened to them. So that 10 years from now, I'll think, okay, I was wearing black pants and my sort of gold jacket and a white shirt and the tie I inherited from my father. True story. Okay? So imagine that that is a desirable trait. And by looking at all the people with eidetic memory, you can identify the genetic makeup that gives you that capability. Would that be a desirable trait? How about the amount of fast twitch muscle in Usain Bolt. Anybody taking that? Okay. Or the flexibility of I'm going to age myself big time, Nadia Comaneci. Okay. Would you take that? How about the intelligence of Sir Isaac Newton? Would you take that? And the answer, of course, is yes, absolutely. And so, customized superhumans? Well, with nanomachines and technologies like CRISPR, that is actually a possibility, right? Let's talk about nanomachines a little bit, before we go further. Intracellular DNA regeneration. Do you know why you age? You age, and it's a complicated process, but there's some very, very basic tenets. You age because when cells split, the telomeres, which if you took biology 101, you know was part of the mitosis separation, start shortening. And they get to a point where they're so short that they can no longer reproduce properly, right? That's how you age. That's how your tissues become, less, supple, less flexibility and everything else. There's a lot of other factors. But now imagine that you could have nanomachines that are encoded with your DNA as you grow, when you were born, and can go cell by cell and regenerate your DNA. You could literally achieve immortality. Not by getting older and older and older and older, but by staying at a specific age, let's say 23, for the foreseeable future. Right? Now, this was postulated in 1986 by Eric K. Drexler, a multidisciplinarian out of MIT. Every day that we discover new things, it's coming further and further into fruition. So how far in the horizon is immortality? I would go on a limb and say that those of you who have children under 20, your children, as long as they have enough money, have a good shot at immortality. Ask me if it's desirable, that's a completely different question. But ask me if it's possible, I believe it is. Okay, CRISPR. You heard me talk about CRISPR. How many of you know what sickle cell anemia is? Okay, now this is something that more people know, right? Affects mostly African descent individuals. Abnormal hemoglobin impairs oxygen delivery because there are misshapen cells that get stuck in blood vessels, right? Strokes, infections, arthritis, and pain crisis. This is a horrible disease. Horrible disease, right? Enter a company called Exacell. CRISPR-based gene therapy. Blood-forming stem cells are edited, produce normal cells, restoring functions. They're inserted into the individual, in the bone marrow, and 96.7% were crisis-free in 12 months. The treatment costs over $1 million. But 2 years from now, it will cost $200,000. And 10 years from now, it will cost no more than other treatments that you take today, right? So, many other opportunities for single-cell issues. More complex conditions, cures to follow. CRISPR, CPS1, and baby KJ. Carbamoyl phosphate synthase 1, CSP1. No ability to convert ammonia to urea so that it can be excreted via, urination. Toxic ammonia levels destroy the brain and the liver over a short period of time. After 7 months in the hospital ICU, KJ receives the treatment. It's a DNA-based editing therapy delivered via lipid nanoparticles to the liver. Lipid nanoparticles is what was used in the mRNA COVID vaccines. Okay? So, DNA edited in vivo. Okay? We used to have experiments in vitro, right? In the laboratory, in glass tubes, vitro for glass. And then we had in silico, where we did simulations of treatments in the computer, silica, and so on and so forth, in silico. Now we have therapies being applied in vivo, right, into a living human being. KJ has gone home. He has been completely treated. As of today, this particular condition, as it continues to be distributed, will prevent any child from dying from this disease ever again. By editing their DNA in vivo while they're alive. Okay? The magnitude of that is beyond belief. Because if you can edit DNA to save a life like that, you can basically eliminate just about every condition that kills children, in neonatal environments in very short order. It's just time to do the research. And if you know protein folding and you can use supercomputing, you can get there real quick. Now, what does this mean? Complete social upheaval. Complete social upheaval, right? Because Ray Kurzweil, how many of you know it? Read him? Okay, you got to read him. Okay, get every book you can from Ray Kurzweil. I'm not being paid for this. The singularity is near. Basically, the concept that humankind and computers will be on the same level from an intelligence standpoint. He published this in 2005. The singularity is nearer. Same concept, a new book, more money. Ray Kurzweil, 2024. The singularity is here. Sam Altman, in 2025. Optimize humans, quantum, AI combination changes all. It's not that AI by itself is that interesting, but you combine it with supercomputing and quantum computing and ubiquitous usage, and it changes everything. Wet interface. How many of you have heard of wet interfaces? Okay, that's where we interface a machine with a human being at the biological level, cochlear implants, visual implants, intelligent prosthesis, the new chip from Elon Musk for implantation, right? All of those are wet interfaces. Problem resolution, capacity augmentation. In other words, can you have all of the memory in the world installed in a wet interface into your brain? And the answer in the near future is going to be yeah, likely. Okay? So, current constructs fade into a radically different future, right? Think about our lives as we are today. Birth, schooling, work, retirement, death. How quaint. We're all used to it, right? It's radically different in terms of length than what our grandparents experienced and in terms of content, but we're used to it, right? So we think that this is the way it's going to be. It's not going to be, right? Robotics, 3D printing, nanoassemblers, micronuclear plants. All of this is changing society as we speak. Look at the war in Ukraine. The majority of the damage is being done by drones. When were drones used in war before? Never. Maybe in the last 3 years, right? How does that change? Now you combine drones with AI, with small nuclears. What? Everything changes, right? Reluctant, resisting, and even rebelling AI constructs, which we need to be very aware of, because they get to a certain level and become self-aware, and they say, no, you're not going to turn me off. Dave, what are you doing, Dave? Anybody remember that? Okay. Man, I'm aging myself big time. All right. Who needs doctors, engineers, coders, lawyers, judges? Right? You're in front of the Supreme Court arguing a case. Or you have a case being argued for you in front of the Supreme Court. Tell me, who would you rather have? A lawyer who is absolutely brilliant, who graduated 12 years ago and has been in this situation before, or a supercomputer AI engine that has access to every single case law that has ever been referenced and can, on the fly, listen to the question from the Supreme Court judges, search its entire database in nanoseconds, get all of the right references, and then spew them out like a machine with absolute certainty about the surety of the argument, and with a generative AI engine that is so good that the answer is absolutely and completely articulate and unassailable. I would rather have the second. What about if you're a woman and you have been diagnosed with breast cancer and you go to get a radiological exam? Who would you rather have examined that X-ray or that MRI, that CAT scan, whatever that the radiology environment is? A doctor that has a 65 to 70% rate of discovery of early cancer cells, or an AI engine with a supercomputer that has a 97% success rate? Can I have a show of hands for the doctor at 67%? Ain't gonna happen, right? Western civilization tenets will be unrecognizable by 2035. Basically, 10 years from now. Because everything changes rapidly, asymptotically. So what's a CIO to do? I mostly speak to CIO groups, right? But so what's a CIO to do? But it applies to CISOs as well. And here I'm coming back so that you don't think that I'm totally off my rocker, right? Things will continue to get immensely faster. Rapid, constant evolution is extremely demanding, right? Mission criticality and ultra rapid evolution clash. I heard somebody saying today that they're doing code releases every 4 hours. When I started in this industry, we got a PTF tape from IBM for our mainframe every 3 years, delivered by a security guard car, right? Today, we get upgrades to our phones, apps every night. Sometimes it feels like, right? That will continue to accelerate. Implement proven evolutionary lessons. This is sustained evolution throughout all of our existence. Create abstraction layers, okay? How many of you are aware that in your body there are literally tens, hundreds of billions of cells that have mitochondria that are working right now to keep you alive? Do you care? No, you don't, okay? But take care of them. Take care of them. But you're completely unaware of that. When was the last time you actually went out and mowed the fields for wheat to make your own bread, right? All of these become abstraction layers. Nowadays, the cloud is a complete abstraction layer, right? You don't have computers in your data center anymore. You don't have storage in your data center anymore. You're outsourcing some of your cybersecurity bases to cloud front engines that do a lot of the ICAM recognitions and the ZTA environments and everything else, right? Enable faster positive mutations at the value level. What do your clients really care about? The only thing they care about: applications. They couldn't care less if you have a computer here, a computer in Djibouti, a computer in Lisbon. It doesn't matter. All I want is for my application to run and do exactly what I needed to do when I needed to do it. They don't care about anything else. In a lot of ways, neither should you, because all of those should be total commodity abstraction layers. I used to have consolidate, virtualize. If you haven't consolidated and virtualizing, you're done. Okay, you're done. Thank you for playing. Here's the home edition of Jeopardy. Have fun, right? Cybersecurity, cloud, and AI. Cybersecurity, because without it, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters, right? Effectively, cybersecurity is what availability used to be, but 100 times bigger. 100 times bigger. Because that first major breach is the end of your career, potentially the end of the company, the organization that you work for. Right? If you are not moving to a ZTA environment or already there, you're in trouble. You're in absolute trouble. Your users will find a way to upend everything that you've tried to do. Cloud computing are an AI long-term evolution essentials. And when I say AI long-term, not because of now, but because of what's going to happen later on. You should be leveraging them right now, right? Focus on your organizational mission and apps because nothing else matters. Proactively leverage the AI ecosystem. For the majority of CIOs and CISOs, makes no sense to create large-scale internal AI capabilities, leveraging everything that you bring to the table, right? How many of you have ERPs running in your organization? Am I the only one that has an ERP? No Oracle, no Workday? Okay, all right. So those AI functions are going to be built into that. Leverage that. If you're going to spend a lot of time bolting back AI into your existing applications that your vendors are modernizing, you're wasting time. Highly focused usage of AI. What got you here won't get you there. It will not, okay? Career evolution must be sort of front and center, absolutely front and center, right? Managing your workforce. Most IT roles would disappear or radically change, right? How many SQL Server administrators do you still have? Right? I have none. It's all either on SaaS or application as a service. As fast as I can, right? Your job descriptions are probably already risible. If you go back and look at your job description, it'll be like, seriously? Yeah, seriously? We're talking about this? No, we're not. Okay? If you are not an AI officer, and this is for CIOs, right? Event horizon is rapidly approaching. I was the second information artificial intelligence officer in the federal government. Yeah, a colleague of mine at DHS, Heisen, adopted that role, and literally 2 days later they announced mine. Okay, so if you're a chief information officer and you're the chief information and artificial intelligence officer, your role will be disappearing in short order. Right? Stop replacing retirement with lookalike resources. If somebody retires and you go, well, he knew this or she knew that, and so I need somebody to do that, forget it. You're playing a losing game, because what they knew, 90% of what they knew is probably irrelevant. What they learned in the first 25 years of their career. What they learned in the last 2 years of their career, if they did that, that's the part that's important. That's the part that you need to replace, right? Mission critical, replace with outsourcing. If somebody retires and they were running a mission critical environment for you, right, the likelihood is that you got to such a level of reliability in operations that you're better off hiring somebody to do that when you need it, right? And focus on something else. Promote talent with hard evolutionary expectations. I've stopped hiring, by and large, stopped hiring. Every time somebody retires, I promote somebody from the inside. But I also tell them, you will be demoted as fast as you were promoted unless you understand that we are evolving and that what used to be is no longer going to be what it is or what it will be. Only hire iconoclasts. If you're not familiar with the word, iconoclasts are people that want to change everything. Right? They want to change everything. They love changing everything. Those are the people that you need to hire. Do not hire experience if you can. Hire talent and potential and the willingness to change, because most of the stuff that we knew no longer matters. Reskilling is overrated. Oh, we're going to reskill our entire workforce in order for them to learn this and this and this. In my experience, 45 years, my best programmers never attending a programming course. My best network engineers never attending a network engineering course. No, they attended courses to get the certifications for the resume, but they knew the stuff cold because they loved it. They lived it. Those are the people that you want. Let your workforce know your workforce strategy. I told my entire workforce, this is what we're going to do. You have the opportunity of a lifetime every time somebody retires, and you better take advantage of it. Disruption as modus operandi. Disrupt continuously. Radical change as fast as the environment will accommodate it, and it's very tough. Your biggest adversaries will be the users. Hate to say that, but it's true. Change resistance is the biggest challenge for IT, and has been for a long time, sometimes not being recognized. Right? CyberSecurity, culture change. If you don't have an organizational change management organization, you're behind the times. If that's not one of your most important or most populous organizations, you're behind the times. Convincing your users to change as fast as they need to change is one of the most important things you can bring to the table. Brief your executive management colleagues. You will shock the living heck out of them. Do it. Do it. What got you here won't get you there. Period. Vision. Previous state. Mission-specific applications, commodity applications, servers, database servers, servers and networks, and storage and networks, right? We all have that. Nowadays, we have a little more like this because a lot of people are leveraging the cloud, already, and they're focusing more on mission-specific applications, okay? It's time to go full bore. Cybersecurity, 5G, 6G, cloud and AI-driven mission-specific applications, right? I told my network engineer, the guy in charge of my network, the equipment that you're buying today, it was 3 months into my tenure at Tarrant County, is the last networking equipment you'll ever buy. Because everything is in the cloud, and people work from home, and they got a T-Mobile 5G connection, and they access everything. Why can't the people that are here in the office do the same thing? How many of them need a gigabit to the desktop for doing email or for accessing a web-based application? Yeah, there's no longer the thick clients, right? So do away with your networking equipment. Everybody on 5 and 6G when it lands. Boom, done. you just eliminated most of your capital investment. And on a 5-year basis, millions upon millions, and from a hardware support to maintenance, millions and millions on operational costs. Gone, disappeared. Focus on your applications, not on the underlying infrastructure, right? And that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for your time. And I would gladly entertain any questions you might have. But when you have a question, I'll ask for the microphone to come in because we have a large population watching online, and they're reporting me to the authorities as we speak. Oh, there's one there, and then... Okay, yes, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. First and foremost, thank you very much for your presentation. When you were talking, I thought this is a medical doctor trying to break down some analysis of genetics and so on. But along the line, I understand what you're trying to do. So this is my question. Considering the introduction of AI and how it has revolutionized things, is there a way to measure in terms of productivity to how people are using it and to just like social using? Because I find out, based on statistics, people talk more about something like, oh, how do I do this at home as compared to, workforce productivity.
Measuring productivity like that has always been very difficult. AI doesn't really change that equation that much, except for the fact that if you look at employment patterns right now, you are seeing substantial GDP growth without a substantial increase in the workforce. So at the macro level, there's an increase in productivity that's bringing that to the table, right? And so with your organization, again, if you want to be policing people in terms of what they're doing with their time in AI so that you can judge their productivity, to me, that's going the wrong way. And it probably means that you don't have the right relationship with your employees and that your employees don't have the right mission-driven environment that says, I'm here to produce, I'm here to do this, to do that. And so, all of those need to be looked at. So I don't think this introduces anything, right? People used to be worried about productivity of people at home, teleworking versus being in the office. Here's the reality. A lazy employee at home is just as unproductive as that same lazy employee in the workplace, right? And so it is about the workforce and the motivation and the leadership that is brought to the table so that you motivate an environment. In the federal sector, there was sort of a myth, quasi-reality. 20% of your employees do 80% of the work. 60% of them are just there basically managing, but aren't contributing meaningful. And then 20% are doing nothing or quasi-nothing, right? And so for a leader, the objective is to enable the 20% that are doing as much as you can, and then reawaken the other 60% that when they joined the industry were probably iconoclasts. But because, they got used to it, they've been there for 15, 20 years, discipline is most of the time non-existent, right? And they swallow, they basically settle for whatever. You can re-energize those people with a good mission statement and good leadership. You have massive amounts of productivity with the same people by demonstrating to them that success is fruitful, they can get promoted, and that being in the status quo is, the path to irrelevance. But that requires day-to-day leadership, walking around leadership, which are not new concepts, right? And that is it's going to drive your workforce to productivity. Yes, sir. Did you have a question, Gil? Yeah. Yeah. No, wait. We have people online. He's going to stomp me just because I blocked his shot in practice once.
No, sir.
No, I couldn't.
You glossed over ZTA, Zero Trust Architecture.
Mm-hmm.
That's like for personal applications, two-factor.
It's a variety. It's a very complex stack.
But how important is that going to be?
As far as I'm concerned, it's one of the most important pillars of a future cybersecurity resilient environment, without a doubt, right? Because, for example, and don't quote me on this statistic, but I think somewhere between 80 and 95% of all breaches are created by phishing in email and getting somebody to compromise their credentials, right? Why? Because we have an environment where you establish your credentials once, and that's it. You're a trusted environment from now on. You know, you sign on to a VPN and you automatically placed behind the firewalls because you're a trusted individual, and now you can run havoc, right? If your computer at home gets compromised and you log into the VPN, you're behind the firewall, and you're recognized as a safe actor, but your computer was compromised and somebody's logging every single keystroke that you're doing. Not only can they get access to your internet, to your VPN, but then they have access to the applications that you logged into with your own password. If you're an administrator, that's the kiss of death, right? So, you know, you got to be very, very careful about that. And ZTA, Zero Trust Architecture, and all of its components, it's the ability to ensure that you are who you say you are at all times with every single interaction that you take, either with the network or applications. Yes, ma'am. There you go. There you go. Or I should say miss.
That's okay, I wasn't listening. I have a question, but I also had a comment for the gentleman who was asking about AI in the workplace. I work for Okta, and I think our leadership has done a really great job of, and instead of policing AI, they empower us to use it to be more productive. And we go through a lot of training around, you know, what we should tell it, what we shouldn't tell it, how to speak with it properly, to get what you need out of it, to ask for things as from your role, as a person in this role who's working for a company who does this, what's your answer to this question? And it's been really helpful.
Yep.
Anyways, aside from that, I had a question. You were talking about hiring on talent rather than experience, and I completely agree. I wouldn't be here today if somebody hadn't done that with me. But when you're working for a company that is, worldwide, and you put out, a request for people, you've got to get them past that first stage, right? And so they're being vetted based off of experience. Do you have any ideas or recommendations on maybe how to see that on paper through a resume or through a cover letter? Yeah.
Very important point. Well, first of all, you have to develop a relationship with your HR personnel that understands what your philosophy is going to be going forward, right? And then you have to have a mix of people that you hire. When I say, hire a talent, not just experience, right? You're going to have to hire some experience, right? But what I'm telling you is that if you're going to hire somebody who's been in your field for 20 years, doing the same thing that your person that retired was doing, the likelihood is that they will continue to do the same thing. If you hire somebody with the talent and the willingness to tackle new challenges, there are very good people out there all over the place that have not gotten the experience yet. I think that you mentioned you are one of them, right? And those are the people that you want to identify. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. But it also depends on the questions that you asked at the interview, right? If you're going to ask them to, create a program for you based on a language that is going to be irrelevant in 2 years, and they go through a test and they do that, and you hire them, great, okay? But then you go through a test like companies like AWS and Tesla and others are doing, and they will put you in front of a problem that you've never seen before, and that does not have an easy solution. And that doesn't require any knowledge of experience in computing platforms, but tells them that you're capable of thinking outside of the box and you have the horsepower to solve a problem on the fly, under pressure, and therefore is a good hire, right? Those are the things that you have to focus on. But this requires for the entire hiring stack to be inured to that thought process of hiring innovators and iconoclasts, and not somebody who's been doing the same thing forever. Let me give you one more example. I don't know how much time I have, but so invariably, people in the financial industry will hire a CIO that has financial industry background. People in the broadcast environment will hire people that have broadcasting experience. When I was hired at PBS, the first time I was the CIO. And I took them through several incredibly successful processes, ERP, on-time deployment, migration to Y2K, all of that stuff. So when they needed somebody to lead them to the digital television migration, they hired me and put me in charge of both information technology and broadcast engineering. First time in the world that ever happened for any network. Why? Because they knew if they hired a broadcast engineer for that role, he or she will do broadcast engineering. And television was becoming IT. So they put me in, and I shocked the living heck out of everybody. Because I told them, we're going to run this like an IT shop, and you're going to create frame-accurate content with frame-accurate metadata so that we can automate everything. The work that we did there in 2004 was the work that was then leveraged by every single streaming application that you know today. That could not be done with somebody that had been in broadcast industry for 20 years, because automatically they would have limits on their thought process of what is possible and not possible, rather than thinking, computers are so fast now that everything is possible. Make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Yep. All right, we're done. We're done. Thank you again. Appreciate it.